This is a story about a woman who planned what she thought was the perfect, controlled end to her marriage. She took her husband to therapy to ask for a divorce, secretly hoping for an emotional explosion, a sign that he might still fight for their relationship. What she got instead was a quiet okay and a husband who moved out completely in under 12 hours, leaving her shattered. Now, she's asking if she was the villain for ambushing him, or if she was just the last one to realize her marriage was already over.
Our marriage hadn't been a fairytale for a long, long time. There wasn't one big, explosive fight that got us here. It was more like a slow, creeping rot. Years of tiny disappointments, of conversations that went absolutely nowhere, of feeling more like roommates than husband and wife. The silence in our house had become a physical thing, thick and suffocating. We'd just sit in the same room, scrolling on our phones, the only sounds being the hum of the refrigerator, and a hollow-sounding laugh at something on a screen. I tried. I really did. I'd suggest date nights that just felt forced and awkward. I'd try to start conversations about our future, our feelings, but his answers were always short, non-committal. It was like talking to a brick wall, except the wall was polite. He was never mean or angry. He was just absent. Emotionally, he had checked out long before I ever thought about ending it. So, I decided on therapy. Not to fix us. I think deep down, I knew we were past that point. I chose therapy as the place to end it. It felt like the right way to do it. A controlled environment. A referee for the emotional explosion I was expecting. I imagined tears, maybe yelling. I pictured him finally showing some passion, even if it was anger. I thought having a therapist there would force him to actually engage. To confront the death of our relationship. In some twisted way, I think I wanted him to fight. I wanted him to prove me wrong, to stand up and say, "No, I'm not letting you go. We can fix this." It was this secret, desperate hope I barely admitted to myself. I was staging an ambush, but a part of me hoped the victim would fight back and win. The therapist's office was exactly what you'd picture: muted colors, comfy but generic furniture, and a box of tissues on the side table that felt like it was mocking me. He sat across from me, looking perfectly composed, his hands just resting on his knees. I, on the other hand, was a complete wreck. My heart was pounding, and my carefully rehearsed words felt like dust in my mouth. The therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Albright, started the session with her usual gentle prompt. "So, what's on your mind today?" I took a shaky breath. This was it. I looked at my husband, searching his face for anything, but his expression was placid, almost bored. I started, my voice trembling, "I think I want a divorce." The words just hung there in the air. I braced myself for the impact, for the shouting, the accusations, the desperate pleas. I had played out a dozen different scenarios in my head, each one more dramatic than the last. But what happened was nothing like I imagined. He didn't flinch. Didn't gasp. He didn't even look surprised. He just held my gaze for what felt like an eternity, and then he gave this small, single nod. "Okay," he said. Just. Okay. That one simple, emotionless word hit me with more force than a scream ever could. It was like a door slamming shut, quietly but with absolute finality. I just stared at him, waiting for more, but there was nothing. He just sat there, calm and still. It was like I'd just told him the grocery store was out of his favorite coffee. Dr. Albright looked between us, her professional composure faltering for a split second. "John," she said, turning to him. "How does that make you feel?" He shrugged, a tiny, indifferent movement. "If that's what she wants, then that's what we'll do. There's no point in fighting it. No point in fighting it." The phrase echoed in that sterile room. All those years, all our memories, and he saw no point in fighting for any of it. The shock was so total that I couldn't even speak. The tears I was so sure would come never did. I was frozen, trapped in a nightmare of my own making. I had come for a battle and walked into a surrender. The rest of the session is a blur of logistics. He was so efficient, so detached, already talking about signing papers and splitting assets. It was like he'd been preparing for this for months. Or maybe even years. The drive home was silent. He drove his car, I drove mine. I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting him to pull over, to call me, to do something that showed this was killing him, too. But he just followed me home at a steady, unremarkable pace. When we walked into the house, the silence that was once just a quiet tension now felt like a giant, empty chasm. I stood in the entryway, totally lost. But him. He walked straight to the hall closet, and pulled out a stack of flattened cardboard boxes. And the sound of the packing tape, that sharp, screeching rip as he pulled it from the roll, that became the soundtrack to my world ending. I watched, numb, as he started moving through our home with a chilling efficiency. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't angry. He was methodical, organized, like he was just completing a task on a checklist. He started in the bedroom, opening his drawers and placing folded clothes neatly into a box. There was no sentimentality. He didn't pause over old t-shirts or gifts I'd given him. It was just stuff, and he was moving it. Then, around 10 p.m., a moving truck pulled up outside. A real moving truck. He'd arranged it. How long had he been planning this? The thought literally made me sick to my stomach. His entire life in our home, packed up and carted away in the dead of night. I didn't help. I couldn't. I just drifted from room to room, watching the spaces we built together get hollowed out. The bookshelf, then the desk, then his side of the bathroom cabinet. Each empty space was like a fresh cut. By 3 a.m., it was done. The truck was loaded. He walked through the house one last time, holding a duffel bag and his keys. He stopped at the front door and finally, he looked at me. "I've transferred half of the money from the joint savings into your personal account," he said, his voice as neutral as ever. "My lawyer will be in touch with yours." And then, he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, and the sound was deafening. 12 hours. In just 12 hours, a decade of my life had been dismantled and removed, leaving me in a half-empty house filled with a silence that screamed. That night was the longest of my life. I wandered through the echoing rooms, my hand brushing against the empty spaces on the walls where our pictures used to be. I lay down on my side of the bed, the other side cold and unnervingly perfect. The shock finally started to wear off, and it was replaced by a pain so deep it felt physical. This wasn't what I wanted. It's a horrible thing to admit, but it's the truth. I wanted the threat of divorce to be a wake-up call. I wanted him to see what he was about to lose and fight for it. For me. Instead, his calm acceptance was the most brutal rejection I could have ever imagined. It told me, without a doubt, that I hadn't been a priority for a very, very long time. He hadn't just agreed to the divorce, he had embraced it with a readiness that completely shattered me. He was already gone, long before I ever said the words. The regret comes in waves, suffocating me. Regret for how I did it, for my selfish need for drama. Regret for not seeing the signs, for ignoring the distance that had grown between us until it was an impassable canyon. I underestimated him completely. I saw him as passive, but he wasn't. He was just done. So now I'm sitting here, in this house that feels way too big and way too quiet, and I just have to ask, am I the a-hole for ambushing my husband with a divorce in therapy? I really thought I was taking control, making a tough, but necessary decision in the right way. But his reaction, his speed, his utter detachment. It makes me feel like I was the villain in a story I didn't even understand. Did I misread everything? Or was I just the last one to realize the marriage was already over? In the days that followed, the exhaustion turned into a painful clarity. The more I replayed our last few years together, the more I could see it. I'd been so focused on my own loneliness that I failed to see his retreat for what it was. A quiet, deliberate departure. His silence wasn't passivity, it was a boundary. While I was getting louder and demanding more, he was silently packing his emotional bags. I think he had already mourned our marriage on his own, a long time ago. When I finally delivered the blow in that therapy office, he was just confirming a decision he had already made peace with. My grand, dramatic gesture was, to him, just a formality. A piece of paperwork to finalize a deal that had been closed in his heart for months, maybe even years. That realization is a bitter pill to swallow. It changes the whole story from me being the one who ended it, to me being the one who finally noticed it was over. The regret isn't just about losing him, but about my own blindness.
So, what's the verdict? The wife staged an ambush in therapy, hoping for a dramatic, emotional reaction that would prove her husband still cared. She wanted him to fight for the marriage. The husband, however, had already mourned the relationship and was prepared to leave. His calm, efficient departure felt like the ultimate rejection. She now feels like the villain, but also wonders if she was just blind to the reality that her marriage was over long before that final therapy session. Who is the a-hole here? Was she wrong to ambush her husband with a divorce, using a therapy session to stage the confrontation? Or was he the a-hole for his cold, detached reaction and for not communicating that he had given up on the marriage long ago? Let us know your judgment in the comments below. What would you have done in this situation? If you've ever been through something similar, sharing your story might help others who are navigating the same difficult path. And if you want to hear more stories like this, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening.